conversation explore the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She is a state attorney in the intersection of life insurance and grief and real life, none other than Miss Stephanie Prestridge.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Welcome, Miss Stephanie on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Absolutely. My name is Stephanie Prestridge. I'm an attorney. For 20 years, I practiced primarily as an estate planning attorney, helping people with wills and trusts and powers of attorney. And as part of that practice, we started seeing a number of cases where life insurance policies that people had paid for years and years were suddenly being disputed or denied or delayed in payment. And we just took it personally on behalf of our clients and shifted our practice to start helping our clients with these life insurance policies so that they would have a resource to fight for something that they had planned on for so many years.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Stephanie. Thank you. And today, let's talk about when life insurance becomes evidence. Life insurance is a solid as ultimate act of love and protection. In what specific legal or financial scenarios does it provide on and this private protective asset get turned against the very family it was meant to protect, becoming evidence of something else entirely?
Absolutely. And it's not always sinister. When life insurance is purchased, it's purchased to provide this form of protection for the entire family. And people think of it a lot as like a light switch where you pay for it, you have this policy, and when someone passes away, the money turns on. It just automatically pays out to the benefit. And what they don't realize is that life insurance is actually investigated. The minute someone passes, it stops and there's a pause. And when they investigate it, the claims examiner is looking at a number of things. They're looking at the status of the policy. They're looking at the cause of death for the insured. They're looking at timelines. They're looking at beneficiaries. And the minute that some of that does not align or there are some questions, all of a sudden you have this pause, this delay, and sometimes a denial on payment of those premiums. And then at that point, all of these things associated with the policy, they suddenly become evidence because it's like the policy is testifying about what was happening in this person's life, in that person's family, whether it's a dispute between beneficiaries or it's questions about health, or maybe something happened and we're not sure how you died, or maybe there's an investigation into how you died. So it's the policy itself and the facts surrounding someone's death is investigated. I always tell people that life insurance does not pay out because someone died. It pays out because it survives the claims examination. And then when you start looking into situations where maybe there is a dispute between the beneficiaries, or maybe there is a questionable death, or we've got some questions about the timeline, at that point, what could be started is just an investigation. When you couple that with money and death and broken relationships or unhealed relationships, all of a sudden everything changes. And that's when the family dynamics just completely change. And it's so heartbreaking because it was something created to provide this source of relief and this source of comfort and protection. And we have seen it so many times where it just implodes family relationships.
Very well said, Miss Stephanie. So, what is the typical catalyst that flips the switch? Is it a divorce filing, a civil lawsuit, a bankruptcy proceeding, or a contested estate? What is asked through a moment a policy transformed from a safety net into a target?
So all of those are excellent examples. You could have done a better job if you were me. But I
Thank you.
always, and yeah, almost a lawyer there. I always tell people it really comes back to unresolved relationships, right? Whether it's a
Hmm.
relationship with a family member or an ex-spouse or a new spouse, or even an unresolved relationship with understandings about family dynamics or money or how money's invested or held or handled. Um, no one starts out as a villain, right? Most of these cases do not start out with a true villain. Now we have some that have villains. We've handled cases where there were murders, and that those were absolute, villains. But most of these cases start out with unresolved relationships where we are now like we never got past how something happened with our ex-spouse, or we had an argument with our children, or siblings don't get along, or there's a dispute over who provided the best care or the most care for a family member. And it's those relationships that, if they're not handled prior to death, or at least acknowledged in a way that allows people to move forward even if they choose not to get along later, those unacknowledged relationships and difficulties, it's like throwing gasoline on them when you add the death of someone you loved and money.
Hmm.
And that's the point where everything implodes, because all of those relationships and all of those dynamics, they follow you into that claims process where, you can come in and say, well, I feel like I did more for mom, and I'm gonna contest you for that money. And you might not win, but I'm gonna make it slower for you to access those benefits. Or, gosh, I'm so sorry. I knew mom or dad probably should have updated their beneficiaries, but I never encouraged them to do it. I didn't remind them. So too bad, so sad. You're not getting anything. Or, gosh, I don't think that's really what mom wanted. So I'm going to call the insurance company and tell them they better not pay you, because I think I can prove that that's really what she didn't want or what dad wanted. And so all of these relationships, all of those dynamics, you see how they affect the people making the claims. And you can start a fight because you never resolved a fight.
Interesting, Mrs. Stephanie. So let's talk about the client realization. What is the most common gut wrenching way a person discover their life insurance is now evidence? Is it a demand, a letter from ex-spouse attorney, or a court order in a lawsuit, or shocking revelation during state administration?
So it can be any of those things. For me, when I'm working with clients, typically it comes down to something much less innocuous. When someone is calling the insurance company, and they know that there's a policy, and maybe they know that they used to be the beneficiary, or they thought that they were the beneficiary. And when they call the insurance company, and the insurance company won't talk to them, and that's really important, because the insurance company will typically only talk to a beneficiary of a policy. And that's a huge, wake up call for someone right there, going, wait, what do you mean you won't talk to me? I'm a beneficiary on this policy. At least I thought I was. Or you can have cases where someone has called up and then said, I'm the beneficiary and it seems like everything's going well. And then all of a sudden you'll get an email or a letter from the insurance company saying, we have had a contesting claim to these benefits. We're going to give you, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to try to resolve this between yourselves. And then if you can't, then we'll file a lawsuit so we can figure out, who we should pay. Because when you look at it like that, the insurance company's never worried about who deserves the money or who's worthy of receiving that benefit. What they're really worried about is making sure they don't pay the wrong person, because they don't want to get in trouble, right? So it's never about doing the right thing. It's about protecting themselves when it comes to that. So it's just it's heartbreaking when you have those calls or you receive those emails, and you absolutely weren't expecting it. I've seen cases where ex-spouses received life insurance benefits because someone failed to update their beneficiary form, and they just had no expectation. A new spouse is expecting to receive these funds, but it was never updated. and sometimes there's nothing we can do. It's just having to pay attention and then break that news to someone.
Definitely. So, Ms. Stephanie, the detailed health and financial questions on a life insurance application create a sworn record. How can the application be used as evidence later to dispute one's health, insurability, and financial status and unrelated matter?
So that is a fantastic question. And it's fantastic because it's so important and it has such a tremendous impact for so long. The first thing that I would tell you is that when someone gets a life insurance policy, they do fill out that health questionnaire. And I can't tell you how many times somebody's completed it and then years later found out, well, I didn't understand the question, right? I thought I
Mm-hmm.
answered it right. I didn't mean to lie. I think it's really, really important that the life insurance company does not distinguish between a mistake and malicious intent.
Mm-hmm.
If you get it wrong, you get it wrong. And so there is with a policy, there's a 2 year contestability period. And that's really important because when someone first gets that policy and you get qualified and you have this policy, if you die anytime in those first 2 years of owning the policy, the life insurance company has the right to go back and check all of your medical records before they pay out anything. And that point they're looking for evidence that you made a mistake or that you deliberately lied on your application, because during that period they're trying to get out of paying it, and they do sometimes. And then after that, that 2 year contestability period stops at some point. So what they're doing now, though, and we'll see, is a lot of times they're coming in and saying, you know what, you committed fraud by not telling us about this health incident. And fraud has no timeline. So, you can claim fraud and be outside that 2 year contestability period. It's just how they, conduct business. Other things that we see all the time, and this is really a big one. A lot of times somebody will have their policy, and let's say for whatever reason they forgot to make a payment. And so they'll get a notice in the mail that their policy has lapsed, right? And they'll
Mm-hmm.
call the insurance company and say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, something happened. Can you reinstate my insurance policy? And the company will say, absolutely, we can do that for you. What they don't tell you is that at that reinstatement, it automatically restarted that 2 year contestability period. So it's
Mm.
reopened the door for them to go in and challenge the health. So it's just once again, it's this way where they're setting themselves up to be able to have evidence to use against you to deny payment of those policies. It's heartbreaking sometimes to have to explain that.
Yes, thank you for the tips, Miss Stephanie. Because most of the people, for sure, they don't know that. For business owners,
Mhm.
policies like a key person insurance for those funding a buy seller agreement are critical. How can this become evidence in partnership dispute, a creditor action, or a business valuation fight?
Well, all the same ways that it could in a personal fight, where if timelines don't match up, if there were this is very common where changes are suddenly being made to the policies, like changes like close to death, or we'll see a lot of changes like in the course of several months or even a year, but multiple changes made and they're very different. And so they really pay attention to that. How many times did somebody try to change it? Was it because there was drama in the business or in the family, or was it because they just didn't understand how to do the form? It's just different things that they're looking at. And then at that point, when you come in and you're looking at the value of businesses, and was this the right amount of life insurance, all of that really should have been looked at beforehand, before they got the policy, to justify the cost and the amount, because there does have to be a viable insurable interest and the right amount. So if I make $10,000 a year, it's their insurance company not going to be thrilled to put $1 million life insurance policy on my life because it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't balance out very well on that. So same thing with businesses. They're going to be looking at it going, okay, if you're getting this life insurance policy as a key man policy to have like, golden handcuffs to keep someone here, then it still has to make sense financially as to the amount. It can be disputed in a number of ways, whether it is disputed at the estate level, where families or companies are disputing, someone's interest in the company, whether that interest was diluted or whether or not they had somehow shifted that interest. It can go a number of ways, and as far as disputing.
A number of ways. So, most Stephanie, let's talk about the irrevocable life insurance trust. In plain language, how does placing a policy inside an irrevocable life insurance legally separated from the insured estate, creating a fortress and the most creditors and divorce courts cannot penetrate?
So that's a good blurb on, and we call them ILETs. Um, they can be wonderful tools. Even though I'm an estate attorney, I don't do a lot of ILETs, so I'm not going to be able to give you this huge, robust answer on them. The real purpose of it, though, is to take this policy, whatever policy it is. Usually, it's a policy that has like a cash value inside of
Hmm.
it, and to move it outside of someone's estate so that at that person's death, it's not counted toward their taxable estate, right? And another benefit of having the ILET is if all of the life insurance money is held inside of that trust, if someone gets divorced or if someone sues them, that money is held by the trust, and the trust never got divorced. The trust didn't get sued. That money's protected. So it's kind of like building a wall around those funds to protect them. So you can use it for really good tax planning in the right circumstances, and then you can also use it for really good family planning, in that you can protect your kids or your heirs from themselves and the people who would try to take advantage of them down the road. I would tell you, though, never ever do an ILET without talking, one, to your estate attorney, and then two, to your CPA or your tax professional, because those two really do go together, and it's such a wonderful tool. But you don't want to have a tool if it's not necessary, right? It's even though it's great, it's not great for everybody all the time. It's got to work in the right circumstances.
So after I lead, Ms. Stephanie, let's talk about the state law as a shield. How dramatically do state exemption laws vary in protecting life insurance, cash value, and death benefits from creditors? What should someone absolutely know about their own state?
So, first of all, life insurance benefits are wonderful in that they bypass an estate. So, and this is something a lot of people don't know, is life insurance has a beneficiary designation, right? And someone can have a will. Your will does not say where your life insurance goes. The beneficiary designation says where it goes. And I've seen so many people who said, well, I updated my will, and my will says that, my life insurance goes to my two kids. It doesn't work that way. Your beneficiary designation on your policy says where it goes. So I recognize that money bypasses the estate. Also, in most circumstances, that money is tax free when it's received by the beneficiary. There are circumstances when it can be taxed, but that's for a CPA or someone at a different level than me to talk about. But it's usually received tax free. Now, what people don't talk about is if you receive this money and you're being sued for something, then even though it bypassed the estate, even though you received it tax free, now that you've received it, you've got cash in hand, and at some point, someone may be able to sue you to access that money. So, always tell people to pay attention to who's receiving so that you can make sure that they receive appropriately, right? So, if you've got a kid that is not very good with money, but you know that it would be a gift to them, to give to them, to help them, launch in life, then absolutely give to them, but find a way to give to them in a way that makes sense, whether it's through a trust or some other means to help them launch without losing what you're providing to them. In other ways to protect those benefits, we always tell someone to look at what you have and review it, every couple of years. I tell everybody a lot of life happens in 5 years. So check every 5 years. Are these still the right beneficiaries? How has your estate changed? How have your beneficiaries changed? What's going on? Everything may be perfect, but if there's any changes that need to be made, update it then. Just look at it, have a conversation with your family to make sure that you're not leaving them in a position where those unresolved relationships give fodder to this fight and this dispute over something that was lovingly intended. I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
Yes, thank you for that, Miss Stephanie. So
Thank
let's talk
you.
about the
Yes.
cautionary tale. Without breaching
Mhm.
confidentiality, can you outline a general case where a life insurance policy becoming evidence led to a devastating financial loss for a family, destroying the protection it was meant to provide?
So, man, we've got so many. I have one with a family that I loved my client. I love all my clients, but I really loved this one. And it was a second marriage for the husband. And this gentleman had passed. He had developed some memory issues later in his life, but he had been with his second wife for almost 30 years, and they ran businesses together. They were the cutest couple. They just adored one another. But he did have an ex-wife. He had adult children from his ex-wife, and it seemed like he was really trying to do the right thing to always be nice to his ex-wife, but not close. Loved his children obviously, but they didn't always get along. They um, he had done very very well in his life, and his children had not succeeded to the extent that their father had, which doesn't mean anything's wrong with them. It's just he set a very high standard. But he loved his new wife, and they were together for just the longest time. And as he aged, they realized that they needed to go in and update their estate and pay attention to make sure that their will was updated, their trust was updated, that beneficiaries were updated. And he was one of those people who only did a little bit of it at a time, right? So something that, with a lot of intense focus could take 2 weeks to 4 weeks, they may have taken a lot longer because it was just not something he wanted to do. And it is a lot of paperwork and time. And closer to the end of his life is when they finally started updating the life insurance beneficiaries. And then he passed. And the surviving adult children challenged the updates to his estate and to the life insurance policy because he had not paid attention to the fact that he had never updated the policy from his ex wife. And it's just one of those things. A lot of people don't think to do it. Getting through the divorce is hard enough, much less sitting down and updating all of that paperwork. And in his case, it was just one of those things he did at the end of his life. And the adult children fought my client for that. And it was heartbreaking because she could never stop to grieve her husband. Um, and all she wanted to do was have what he intended her to have. And it was so sad to see these grown children fighting over this when they had received so much from an estate prior. And there was no question that he loved his wife, that he intended for his wife to receive these things. We had to have a trial with former lawyers and former doctors and friends come forth and testify that, yeah, this is what he intended. It just he just waited till the end to do his paperwork. Um, it, it was heartbreaking. I would never want that for someone.
Really do it now, people. Revise, revise, and revise. So, conversely, can you share a, well, in general term, example where protective or proactive, correct structuring of a policy successfully shielded a family financial future during a major lawsuit or divorce?
Oh goodness. Usually I don't see them when they're all happy. Um, I usually see it when it's a problem. Um,
Yes.
I I can use my family as an example, if that's fair. So I'm an unusual lawyer because I actually really like life insurance. Like I've always carried a lot of life insurance, and I've always used it like for investment. Like I just like to throw money in there and let it grow. And I know there's tons of people who have different ideas. It's just kind of how I like to use it. And I have two children, and I'm married to my wonderful husband. And given the fact of, like we're both lawyers, we both work in life insurance and estate planning, and our kids, so they hear this conversation all the time. And we're very open with them. We sit down and we're like, okay, this is what we have and this is what we're going to do. And I remember with my policy, I was telling our daughter, I was like, look, I'm going to leave 50% of it to you in trust and 50% to your brother in trust. And when she was younger, she was very upset about that. She was like, I don't understand. If you're leaving that money, it's for me. I should be able to have it. And I explained to her, I was like, what if someday I'm not here? And I've got this money and I've put it in trust for you. And then you meet Biff, and you and Biff decide to go get married. And I want you to be married and I want you to be happy, even if I'm not here. I said, but y'all decide to move to the beach and you buy a condo on the beach, and you use that money I left for you to buy that condo. And that money's in trust. So what really is going to happen is that trust is going to buy that condo for you. And then Biff meets somebody in a bikini on the beach and they decide they don't want to be with you anymore. Not only did I leave you money, but I protected you, because Biff didn't marry your trust. He married you. He can't take that property from you. It's safe. And then at that point, she was like, this is fabulous, Mom. We should do more of these. And it's just interesting to have that conversation with, my kids are 17 and 13. So it's interesting to have conversations with people at that age to say, okay, this is why I'm doing it. And then to see, once they understand like the purpose and how it protects them in their future, um, it's just fascinating to they got it immediately and they were thankful about it. They would still like to receive everything outright, and they did try to negotiate with their daddy for them to get money straight from him, but we've raised them to do that. So it's kind of fun, but it's beautiful to know that you can give and give in a way that accounts for the people who are receiving, and protect them and love them. I would say that one of the things that's hardest for me is recognizing that when people make changes to their life insurance beneficiaries, they are not required to tell you if they've changed their beneficiary designations. And I think that's fundamentally right. Like, we should not have to disclose what we intend to do with our estate, because it's ours and we're going to do what we want with our stuff. However, when you make those changes and then you pass away, I wish that people had more room to have those conversations, or more comfort in having those conversations, because sometimes that change causes more hurt feelings and misunderstanding, and which lays another part of the foundation for disputes down the road, if there's unsettled relationships. I think that it would be so beautiful if, when people are reviewing their documents and making their decisions, even if they don't tell everything, if they don't tell the exact amount or the exact percentages, just the conversation to say, I want you to know that I love you. and I've made some changes to my estate, or I've made some changes to my life insurance. And I did this because I love you and I'm loving you the best way I know how. And it doesn't solve every fight, but gosh, what a gift to know that somebody didn't do it because they were mad at you or because they were disappointed in you, but that they saw you and that they were loving you the best way they knew how.
Very well said, Miss Stephanie. Very well said indeed. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry, and third season, and my book 101 review, and sixth season as well, comedy 101 in third season, and my food 101 in sixth season two, geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101, our fifth season, science 101, sex 101 in its fourth season, spiritual awakening, trivia 101, law 101, mental health 101, motivation 101, entrepreneurship 101, and of course Bible verses 101 are my baby podcast. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Stephanie, for anyone with a life insurance policy, what is the single most important question they ask their advisor today to determine the protection is actually a vulnerable asset waiting to become evidence?
Check your beneficiary designations. Literally, that, just make sure you've designated your beneficiaries, pay attention to that. And honestly, if you have life insurance, let someone know that you have it. We get calls. I get at least 5 to 10 calls every day of someone saying, I think my mom or my dad or my cousin or my brother, I think they had a life insurance policy, but I don't know where to look. So you've got someone who's grieving, trying to pay for a funeral, and now we've got to send them on a wild goose chase to go find something that we hope you had and put in place to give them the protection and the resources they needed. Just tell someone if you have any. So it's a good start.
A good start. Yes, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Stephanie. So can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever project that you're doing right now?
Absolutely. If anyone has any questions about denied or delayed life insurance claims, so when someone passes, if your policy is not paying out, if it's being disputed, if it's been denied, please reach out to us at lifeclaim.com. We are pleased to look at that and see if there's a way to help, remove the delay or fight the denial or resolve the dispute. It's our honor and pleasure to do that.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Stephanie Prestridge, because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this to rise. So, Miss Stephanie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Monica, people, see you soon.